January 1570, Veliki Novgorod, 20 degrees below zero. The frozen Volkhov River stretches like a white sheet under a pale winter sun. The city's famous bell, the symbol of Novgorodian independence, has been silent for almost a century. But today, something far stranger than a bell is about to disturb the silence. A black column of horsemen approaches the city gates. They ride black horses. They wear black robes like monks, but with swords. And attached to their saddles are the most absurd accessories in military history: dog heads and brooms. Literal dog heads, severed, rotting, or maybe just stuffed, sources disagree, and brooms, because nothing says elite royal guard like a cleaning implement. The citizens of Novgorod have no idea what's coming. They've prepared bread and salt. They've prepared prayers. They've prepared for a royal visit, not a royal meltdown. What they don't know is that their Tsar, Ivan IV, the man history would call the Terrible, has spent the last 6 years building a state within a state called the Oprichnina. He's created a personal army of black-clad lunatics who literally carry dog heads and brooms to symbolize their mission: to bite and to sweep out all enemies of the state. And today, Ivan has decided that the entire city of Novgorod is an enemy. Prepare yourselves. We are going to 16th century Russia, and we are bringing a very large broom. Before Ivan became the Terrible, he was just a kid with a crown and a really, really messed up childhood. August 25, 1530, Moscow, the Kremlin. A boy is born to Grand Prince Vasily III and his second wife, Elena Glenskaya. They name him Ivan. The birth is greeted with church bells and celebrations. Russia finally has an heir. Then, when Ivan is 3 years old, his father dies, 3 years old, and he becomes Grand Prince of Moscow. For the next 8 years, Ivan is a pawn in a brutal game of thrones. The boyars, the powerful noble families, fight each other for control of the child Tsar. They murder each other. They murder his mother, poisoned, probably by the Shaisky faction. They murder his advisors. They drag him through endless power struggles while he watches, helpless, terrified, and increasingly angry. Ivan grows up in an atmosphere of chaos, betrayal, and violence. He sees men he trusts get executed. He sees his own relatives murdered. He learns that the world is a dangerous place, that nobody can be trusted, and that the only way to survive is to become more dangerous than everyone else. In 1547, when Ivan is 16, he is crowned Tsar of all Russia, the first Russian ruler to hold that title. He's young, intelligent, ambitious, and desperate to prove himself. His early reign is actually pretty good. He marries Anastasia Romanovna, a woman he genuinely loves. He launches reforms. He conquers new territories. He even tries to modernize the legal system. The young Tsar is popular, energetic, and for a while, relatively sane. Then in 1560, everything falls apart. Anastasia dies. Ivan is devastated. He's convinced she was poisoned by the boyars. The grief, the paranoia, and the anger consume him. And Ivan, who has always been volatile, begins to spiral. In December 1564, Ivan does something so bizarre that even his own courtiers don't know how to react. He packs his bags. He takes his family, his treasury, his icons, and his entire court. He loads everything onto sleighs and disappears into the snow. No explanation, no warning, just gone. For weeks Moscow panics. The churches are empty. The government stops functioning. The boyars run around like headless chickens. Where is the Tsar? What do we do? Who's in charge? Then, in January 1565, a messenger arrives with a letter. Ivan explains everything. He's not dead. He's not kidnapped. He's just really, really angry. He accuses the boyars of treason, corruption, and generally making his life miserable. He announces that he's abdicating. He's done. He's out. Goodbye, Russia. The boyars panic even more. They send a delegation begging him to come back. Please, Your Majesty, we'll do anything, just name your price. Ivan names his price. He wants absolute power. He wants his own personal army. He wants to execute anyone he doesn't like. And he wants a whole chunk of Russia turned into his private playground, a state within a state where normal laws don't apply. The boyars agree. They have no choice. And thus, on February 3, 1565, the Oprichnina is born. The Oprichniki. The Oprichniki are Ivan's secret police, his personal hit squad, his loyal killers. They dress entirely in black. They ride black horses. They swear absolute loyalty to the Tsar and nobody else. And they have one very, very distinctive feature. They carry brooms and dog heads. Literally. According to contemporary accounts, including those of foreign mercenaries who served in the Oprichnina, Johann Torb and Ellet Cruz, the Oprichniki attached dog heads and brooms to their saddles. The dog heads symbolized their loyalty to the Tsar. They were the Tsar's hunting dogs, ready to bite and gnaw out treason. The brooms symbolized their mission to sweep out all enemies of the state. Imagine seeing a column of black-clad horsemen galloping toward your village, with literal dog heads swinging from their saddles, waving brooms like they're about to clean your entire existence off the face of the earth. You'd run, you'd hide, you'd pray. According to legend, Ivan's own horse was decorated with a silver dog's head that clacked its teeth with every step. Because nothing says, "I am the legitimate ruler of Russia," like the sound of metal teeth clicking at you from your Tsar's saddle. The Oprichniki were the most feared force in Russia. They could arrest anyone, they could execute anyone, they could confiscate anyone's property. There was no appeal, there was no trial, there was just the Tsar's word and the Oprichniki's swords. Ivan used them to destroy his enemies. But enemies was a flexible term. Anyone who annoyed Ivan could become an enemy. Anyone who disagreed with Ivan could become an enemy. Anyone who looked at Ivan the wrong way could become an enemy. In 1569, Ivan decided that the entire city of Novgorod was an enemy. Novgorod was one of the oldest and most important cities in Russia. It was wealthy, independent, and proud. It had its own traditions, its own government, and its own archbishop. For centuries, it had been a rival to Moscow. And Ivan, who had spent his entire life crushing rivals, decided it was time to destroy it once and for all. The pretext was a letter. Ivan was convinced that the Novgorodians were planning to defect to Lithuania, Russia's enemy to the west. The evidence? A forged letter, probably. A rumor, almost certainly. Ivan didn't care. He saw a conspiracy everywhere, and Novgorod was the biggest conspiracy of all. So in December 1569, Ivan assembled an army of Oprichniki and marched north. The city had no idea what was coming. January 2, 1570. The Oprichniki arrived at Novgorod. They surrounded the city. They sealed all the gates. They cut off all escape routes. January 6, 1570. Ivan himself arrived at the city. The Archbishop of Novgorod, Pimen, led a delegation to greet him, carrying crosses and icons, the traditional symbols of welcome. Ivan refused the blessing. He accused the Archbishop of treason. The Archbishop was arrested on the spot. Then the absurdity began. The investigation. Ivan didn't just start executing people. He conducted an investigation. A full, formal, bureaucratic investigation, with interrogations, with torture, with all the paperwork. The Oprichniki went from house to house, arresting everyone they could find, not just men, but women and children too. They confiscated property. They looted churches. They burned monasteries. But here's where it gets absurd. The evidence. According to some accounts, the evidence of Novgorod's treason was laughably thin. A forged letter, a rumor, maybe even just Ivan's paranoia. But Ivan didn't need evidence. He needed a performance. The executions. According to the Synodicon of the Disgraced, a memorial list compiled by Ivan himself after the pogrom, Maluta Skuratov, Ivan's chief executioner, personally executed 1,490 people by hand-cutting, probably meaning beheading. Another 15 people were executed by firearms. Most historians consider these numbers vastly understated. The actual death toll may have been 4,000 to 15,000 people. But the most bizarre method of execution was reserved for the river. The Volkhov River. According to the Novgorod Third Chronicle, mass executions took place on the Volkhov River. The condemned were tied to sleds with long ropes, dragged through the entire city to the river, and thrown under the ice. Imagine it, the frozen river, the black-clad executioners, the sleds, the bodies disappearing under the ice, and Ivan, the Tsar of all Russia, watching from his tent, probably eating something, probably bored. The aftermath. For 5 weeks, the Oprichniki rampaged through Novgorod. They looted churches, they burned monasteries, they murdered priests, they confiscated everything of value. By the time Ivan left in February, Novgorod was a shadow of its former self. The city never fully recovered. Its population never returned to pre-1570 levels. Its political independence was gone forever. Novgorod had been destroyed, not by war, not by famine, but by the paranoia of one man. The Novgorod pogrom was the peak of Ivan's cruelty, but it wasn't the end. The Oprichnina continued for another 2 years. Ivan executed more boyars. He confiscated more estates. He killed more people. But the violence began to backfire. The economy collapsed. The army weakened. The boyars, terrified and desperate, started plotting against him. In 1572, Ivan abolished the Oprichnina. He officially ended the institution he had created, but the terror didn't stop. Ivan was still paranoid. He was still violent. He was still dangerous. He just found new ways to express his madness. The fake Tsar. In 1575, Ivan did something so bizarre that historians still can't agree on what he was thinking. He abdicated the throne again and crowned a Tatar prince named Simeon Bekbulatovich as the new Tsar of all Russia. Yes, the Tsar of all Russia, the most powerful man in the country, voluntarily stepped down and handed the crown to a Tatar nobleman. But here's the catch: Ivan didn't actually give up power, he just pretended to. Simeon issued decrees, Simeon sat on the throne, Simeon received ambassadors. And Ivan wrote humble petitions to Simeon, signing them as Ivan's Vasiliev, little Ivan Vasilievich, with his children. To the great Prince Simeon Bekbulatovich of all Russia, Ivan's Vasiliev and his children, Ivans and Fedorts, bow their heads in supplication. Imagine being Simeon. You're a Tatar prince, a puppet of the paranoid Tsar. You're sitting on the throne of Russia, and the actual Tsar, the man who could have you killed at any moment, is writing you letters like you're his boss. It's absurd, it's insane, and it's pure, unfiltered Ivan. The murder of the son. Then came the tragedy that would haunt Ivan for the rest of his life. November 16, 1581, Alexandrov Sloboda. Ivan's son, also named Ivan, was his heir. The young prince was his father's favorite. He was also a brutal man in his own right. He had already participated in executions and shown signs of his father's cruelty. On that November day, Ivan confronted his son in the palace. The prince was pregnant with his wife's child. Ivan accused the son of treason, or maybe he just got angry about something trivial. The details are unclear. What is clear is that Ivan struck his son in the head with his staff. According to some accounts, the blow landed on his temple. The prince collapsed. He was bleeding profusely. Ivan rushed to his side, screaming for help, but it was too late. The prince died a few days later, on November 19. Ivan was devastated. He had killed his own son, his only worthy heir, the future of his dynasty. He mourned for months. He wore black. He refused to see anyone. He gave huge donations to monasteries. He prayed constantly, but nothing could undo what he had done. He had murdered his own child. The guilt consumed him. His health declined. His mind deteriorated further. By 1584, Ivan was a wreck, physically broken, mentally unstable, and politically isolated. The death. On March 18, 1584, Ivan died while playing chess. He was 53 years old. He had been Tsar of Russia for 51 years, longer than almost any other Russian ruler. His death was surprisingly peaceful. He sat down to play chess with a nobleman. He started arranging the pieces, and then he collapsed, dead just like that. The body was taken to the Kremlin. The bells of Moscow began to ring, and the Russian people, who had lived in terror of their Tsar for decades, finally began to breathe again. So what do we take away from Ivan the Terrible? First, the danger of trauma. Ivan was a child who watched his family die. He was a teenager who lived in constant fear of assassination. He was a young man who lost the only person he ever truly loved. He never recovered from these wounds. He spent his entire life trying to protect himself from a world that had already broken him. Trauma doesn't just hurt, it transforms. It can turn a person into something they never wanted to be. Ivan was not born a monster, he was made into one. Second, the cost of paranoia. Ivan saw enemies everywhere. And when you see enemies everywhere, you start treating everyone like an enemy. You execute innocent people. You destroy entire cities. You alienate everyone who might have helped you. By the end of his reign, Ivan had no friends, no allies, and no one he could trust. He had created a world where everyone was afraid of him, but nobody loved him. He was the most powerful man in Russia, and he was completely alone. Third, the absurdity of absolute power. Ivan's reign was filled with moments of pure absurdity. Dog heads on saddles, brooms as military insignia, a fake Tsar who ruled while the real Tsar wrote humble petitions, an army of black-clad monks with swords. Absolute power doesn't just corrupt, it makes you weird. It makes you do things that nobody else would even think of. It turns you into a character in your own dark comedy. Fourth, the legacy of terror. Ivan's reign of terror didn't end with his death. It shaped Russian politics for centuries. His successors inherited a kingdom that was traumatized, impoverished, and deeply suspicious of centralized power. The Oprichnina became a blueprint for future secret police forces, from the Tsarist secret police to the Soviet KGB. Ivan the Terrible didn't just terrify his own subjects. He terrified generations of Russians who came after him. His name became a symbol of everything that could go wrong when one person has too much power and too little restraint. So here's your takeaway, friends. Ivan the Terrible wasn't just a tyrant. He was a tragedy, a man who was broken by the world and decided to break it back. A ruler who created a personal army with dog heads and brooms because he was too paranoid to trust anyone else. He ruled for 51 years. He built the Russian Empire. He also destroyed the city of Novgorod. He executed thousands of people, and in the end, he killed his own son. The Oprichniki are gone. The dog heads and brooms are just historical curiosities. But the lesson remains. When you give one person absolute power and a paranoid mind, the results are never pretty. Ivan the Terrible died alone in a room playing chess. He had everything and nothing. He was the most powerful man in Russia, and he couldn't even protect his own family from himself. So the next time you hear about a ruler who thinks everyone is out to get them, remember Ivan. Remember the dog heads. Remember the brooms. And remember that sometimes the most terrifying weapon in history isn't a sword or a gun. It's a mind that has convinced itself the whole world is a conspiracy. Ivan IV reigned from 1533 to 1584. He was the first Tsar of Russia. He created the Oprichnina in 1565, a state within a state with its own army and its own laws. He ordered the Novgorod pogrom in 1570, which killed between 4,000 and 15,000 people. He killed his own son in 1581. He died in 1584 while playing chess. And somewhere in Alexandrov Sloboda, a black-clad horseman is still riding through the snow, carrying a dog head and a broom, looking for traitors who don't exist.